Welcome back, everybody, to the Game of Thrones podcast, part 2. We will be covering episode 6, The Iron Throne. I am joined by my good friend, Chloe Harrison. Check her out on Twitter. Chloe, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Chloe, how can the people interact with you?
I am on Twitter at Closter Talks, CHLOSTER Talks. It's one word. I'm also on Tumblr, the Closter Talks Sports, YouTube Closter Talks, Facebook Closter Talks, all of it.
Check her out. She's got some interesting stuff. She's been posting throughout the Game of Thrones season about different theories, different themes. And she also has some content in regards to track and field. Chloe, you want to tell the people about that?
Yeah, so coming soon, I'm working on a regional preview for the NCAA Track and Field Championships. Regionals take place this week in Sacramento and Jacksonville, and then the national championship is coming up the first week of June. So just trying to get all my thoughts together. I think it's going to be a really exciting postseason for track, and you guys should definitely check it out.
Check her out. She puts a lot of work into her videos. Professional editor. Check her out.
You know.
You can follow us. We have collaborated, and you can follow us on SoundCloud at The Real Pine, on Twitter at The Pine Pod, on Instagram at The Pine Podcast, on YouTube at The Pine Podcast. Check us out, like us, subscribe, whatever you got to do, just interact with us. We're going to jump right into it. Game of Thrones, once again, episode 6, The Iron Throne, the final season of Game of Thrones, the series finale, the culmination of content spanning from 2011 to 2019. It's over, and I have mixed emotions, and that's why we want to talk to the people about it. Chloe, what was your take on episode 6? And once again, we're doing this live. We are podding to you while watching the episode, so you get a pure, raw emotion from us.
So, well, when I initially watched it last night, afterwards, I felt like it was a great way to end it, just given the circumstances, because I've always felt that this season was rushed. I still feel like there should have been a season 9. I think season 8 should have focused on the Battle of Winterfell, delving more into who the Night King was and the extent of Bran's power, and then season 9 delving into Daenerys and who she really is and how she took over King's Landing. Still, I thought it was a good ending for what they gave us. It wasn't as satisfying as I needed it to be overall, just like in terms of the depth of the writing and how far they could have gone if they had just given it a couple more years. So yeah, I just think in terms of circumstances, it was one of the better episodes of the season.
I will ask you this question, and I'll answer it. I'll answer it first. Well, I'll ask you and I'll answer it, or I'll tell you what I think. I want to ask you, what do you believe is a good villain?
What do I believe is a good villain?
What are the characteristics of a good villain?
Characteristics of a good villain, I think, for me personally, somebody that had someone that has some typical evil characteristics, like you can tell that they're not the protagonist in the story, but also have a complex enough character to where they could become an anti-hero, they could be good, or you can see the motive behind why they're evil, but still think that they're evil, if that makes sense. I think in Game of Thrones, Cersei was one of the best at it. Cersei did what she had to do to protect her family, but she also became power hungry. So there was a lot of layers to her as a villain, but also as a person. When they stripped her down for who she was, literally, as she marched through the streets, and the nuns of the high priest were saying shame. We saw Cersei as a human, and other people only saw her as that, like Tyrion, and that's what clouded their judgments by also failing to see who she was as a villain. Right. I think Cersei as a villain is what you would want from any show or any film. She's complex, she's a human, but she's also quite evil.
I believe that the perfect villain has these qualifications. They attempt to leverage
right.
duty and necessity against each other. They don't have any interpersonal skills. They create division amongst good guys. They create a false sense of community.
Yes.
But you ultimately understand what their motivation is.
Yeah.
Watching this episode 6, The Iron Throne, it felt very brooding, right? We see the opening scene. Tyrion is walking through the wreckage of King's Landing. It's ash falling through the sky. Me and you joked about the guy that was like shirtless and he had a big like burn mark on his back and he just looked disheveled. And Tyrion is going through.
I thought the dead came back at that point. Oh God!
Plot
I
twist.
was like, oh, is it gonna be a season 9? Like, is there a movie?
Right.
Like, what is happening?
Plot twist. And so, this is what this episode felt like to me. It felt like they were getting ready to unveil a villain, right? Because they're showing Tyrion. Tyrion is a sympathetic character, the imp, right, who's walking through the ruins of his former home, and everything has been taken from him. But it also contrasts like his journey, right? It's all come to this point. If we were to grade this episode, I would like us to grade it on narrative, characters, the villain, acting performances, visual cinematography, music, emotional impact, and long-term impact in regards to looking at it over and over again. Like, how many times will we watch this episode after it's finished? Currently, I think I'm at 2 now because I'm watching it for the second time. I felt like they did not do a good job setting up Daenerys as the villain of this episode. And
I felt the same way.
The writing kind of contradicted itself. So we're at the scene now where Tyrion is removing rubble, and he sees his sister and his brother, holding each other, and he just is breaking down in tears. And I don't really understand. Could you explain to me what you think he's crying about? Like, obviously they're dead, but like, what was his end goal for the two of them? That's what I need answered for me.
I think, well, the thing is, when you have a dysfunctional family, it's a very complicated thing to balance, the way a family can hurt you, but then also feeling for them when they die. It's interesting. Earlier today, I was watching a documentary on Judy Garland, and I respect her more now than I ever have, just learning her story. Her mom was abusive in the sense where she wanted to live out the singing career she never had through her daughter. And as a result, she would make her daughter and Judy's sisters take amphetamines in the morning and take sleeping pills at night so that way they can perform every day as singers. And that's what led to Judy Garland's lifelong struggle with addiction to barbiturates and amphetamines. I never knew that. And, in the middle of the documentary, they were talking about when her mom died. I want to say it was after A Star is Born, but don't quote me on that. But it was in the 50s when her mom died, and she was inconsolable, and she relapsed into an addiction. So I think it's just it's a hard dynamic to explain, somebody who you've hated so much, but it's still your family. And I think in that moment, it was just like, I think Tyrion was just overwhelmed by the gravitas of losing losing his siblings, the realization that he's the only Lannister left, and the way it ended, like they didn't even get to, he wanted Jaime to go to Pentos and start a life, and Jaime couldn't shake Cersei. Cersei was his addiction, and they ended up dying together, much in the same way that they were being formed in the womb together, as someone said.
That's it. I didn't even see that. That's a good point.
I think it's just that for him, like, oh my gosh, like this really happened, and I don't know how to cope. Right.
I think another interesting thing is that they chose Tyrion to go through and see the wreckage of King's Landing, and not they chose him to just go through and survey the damage, right? Because he was the only one, honestly, that had any emotional attachment to the place. Dany does too, but her father kind of was had that role where he ruled over King's Landing. But out of everybody that's left alive, I don't know if anybody else has a really strong emotional connection to that place.
Right, and you also got to remember, like, Daenerys left King's Landing as a baby, so, like, she doesn't know the place at all. Like, this is her first time, like, really being in the heart of the city.
What's interesting? What's interesting too is everything matters. Every frame of video matters, right? And Game of Thrones season 8 has done a fantastic job with their cinematography.
This scene right here.
And so,
this scene right here when Drogon flies and you see the wings behind Daenerys. That was amazing. Like, honestly, that was the shot of the series for me. That was beautiful. I was screaming when I first saw it.
So this is where it felt like a music video to me, like some really eerie, dark music video. You see the horses restless. You see Jon and Arya walking up towards her. My beef with the shot was that I saw immediately where the writers were going, and it felt very Hitler-esque. It felt very Hitler World War II-esque. Like she's giving a speech over ruin and devastation, and the Dothraki, they don't look like civilized. They look unruly. You know what I mean? The Unsullied, they look menacing, right? And it's a completely different dynamic from what we've seen her through 7 seasons. Right, even in episodes this season, she still seemed like a good character. But the black flag with the red dragon, the Unsullied like just menacing, the Dothraki yelling, and then Jon Snow looking uncertain. It's like, why are they setting this up that quick? And they set it up beforehand by showing Grey Worm slaughtering people in the streets, which that's not typically what they do, right? And
I felt like the Grey Worm part shocked me. I felt like, first of all, Emilia Clarke delivered the hell out this
great
speech.
Actress, yes.
Like just hers. I mean, it was brilliant, and I mean, this is a language that they made up for the purpose of the show, so that was fantastic. But it reminded me a lot of, you know, when we first heard her speak High Valyrian, when she was talking to the slave masters, and that's when Drogon burned someone to death for the first time. It reminded me of that scene in Karth, and the flag reminded me of when she put it over Marine. And I mean, like, I have so many questions as to like the pace was always going to be off this season, but one of my questions was, well, what happens to Marine? Like, you know, and I think people forget that Daenerys has been a colonizer and Daenerys has been who she is. It's just, I feel like it's a lot more forced and it wasn't set up properly for us to digest this season. But it wasn't until this season that I realized, oh man, like I've been standing a colonizer this whole time. And I thought back to season 5.
But here's the thing.
Wait. I thought back to season 5 with the Sons of the Harpy. And, you know, remember, like, one of them was unmasked, and she was like, you tried assassinating me, we're gonna kill you in the public square because that's the right thing to do. And I was agreeing with her. I was like, well, yeah, he should die because he tried assassinating the queen. And Sir Barristan, when he was alive, was like, I wouldn't do it. And he was talking about how she's not like her father, thank the gods, but the Mad King did what he always thought he was just right until the very end. And he started believing that everything he did was just and good when it wasn't. And with Daenerys, when she killed that son of the Harpy unmasked, like the village people, like the people of Meereen were begging her not to do it. She did it anyway. And when she did it, that was, I mean, like Game of Thrones was perfect with tension in certain moments. That was a moment right there because the people grew silent and then they started attacking her. That's why the city was burning, and she eventually left Daario Naharis and the Second Sons to take care of it while she went to conquer Westeros. But it's like nothing was ever really solved with Meereen, and I felt like, you know, in retrospect, that was the biggest clue in our seeing who Daenerys really was. She was a colonizer that didn't handle problems well and kind of just let them be just to go conquer something else.
But what did we charge? We charged that when we were reviewing those episodes as her being a young ruler and not really being polished. And then after those scenes, you saw her start to put people around her that kind of had a little bit more tact.
But Sir Barristan was around her already. Mormont was there, and this was before he revealed that he was a spy. It's not like she didn't have advisors. Missandei was there the whole time. Grey Worm. I mean, first of all, Grey Worm should have died as Sons of the Harpy. It's a wonder he lasted this long, if we're being honest. So I don't know if I necessarily want to blame it on her being a young ruler. I like when I watched season 5, I was under the impression of, okay, maybe she'll learn from Meereen, handle the problem, and go to Westeros. And when the problem was never handled and she left anyway, I was like, ooh, I don't know.
Right. I have to rewind back to some of the words she used. She spoke about breaking the wheel. She talked to people that she had freed. She said, you were enslaved, now you are liberators, and we're not going to stop here. We're going to continue, right? Once again,
and we're gonna continue into like Dawn and all this other stuff. And I'm like, but the people are already free.
Are there any people left? Right? Are there any people to be liberated? Right? Is what I'm looking at from this shot. But here is where I am trying to make sense of writing decisions, right? And trying to make the final episode make sense to me based on what the writers did. And that's, as a fan, I'm always going to sound like I'm knocking the show because I'm trying to make sense of a linear timeline that was rushed. And that's my beef with the show. So if we rewind and we go back to episode 5 and she doesn't burn King's Landing down, right? And she directly attacks Cersei instead of attacking the people first, we wouldn't be having a discussion about her being a liberator, right? So that's there once again is a writing decision I'm confused about. Here's another part too. So Jon and Arya start looking at each other and consoling each other, and they're talking about like, that was crazy what we just experienced. She seems like she's off her rocker a little bit, and somebody needs to go talk to her. And what doesn't make sense is when Tyrion, like in front of everybody, takes off his sigil and throws it on the steps as a statement. In real life, you get killed there, right? Like,
I'm surprised he's lived this long. I thought he should have died with Varys, to be honest. And so
there's a conflict for me because she said, if you cross me again, that will be the last time. And when he takes off the sigil, she doesn't rage out or do anything. So what happened to Daenerys where she burns the whole city down and then her advisor, the Hand of the King, literally defies her in her face and she just walks off? Like, that's the confusion for me, right?
Know.
So the writing, the flow and ebb of the writing has some weird parts to it.
Yeah, and I also think there were a lot of continuity errors in this episode because, I mean, as we'll get into by the end of the episode, we see like the wall was rebuilt somehow, or you could tell like a lot of this stuff they shot or used the CGI before the burning of King's Landing and before the White Walkers came.
Like, is it snowing in King's Landing right now, or is that ash?
I thought it was ash, to be honest. And I mean, people, I feel like a lot of people were complaining about a lot of theories that didn't come true. But one of them that did come true was when Daenerys finally touches the throne. Because like that was her vision in season 2 when she was in Karth. Like she didn't want to touch the throne. And, she obviously sees the wall, which probably reflects back to the Battle of Winterfell. And then, she sees Khal Drogo and her child, which is, who she'll eventually see by the end of this episode. It's not shown, but I mean, obviously she ends up with them. I don't know. I mean, I just felt like there were a lot of continuity errors. I felt like this episode was the most rushed. And it was like, they tried to be joking at the end, but it was like Game of Thrones had its quips, but it was never that kind of show.
It wasn't a comedic show or a tongue-in-cheek show.
Well, it was never that kind of show to have a happy ending. I mean, it's Game of Thrones, and I didn't expect this many people to live. So I felt like that part was weird. But like I said, I mean, they wrote this in 2 years. They should have taken their time with it. But given the circumstances, I mean, it closed loose ends,
but not completely.
It left some open. Yeah.
Right.
And I know there was like a Twitter, it's like someone made a thread about it. And basically what happened, George R.R. Martin, who wrote the books, created all these characters. And it's like, you know, he treated them like a garden. It was like he was creating all these plants and they just kept growing and growing. Well, what happened, the stories grew out of his control, and it got to the point where he couldn't tie all the loose ends together. So I think even if the books come out, there's not going to be a whole lot of closure anyway, right. You know, because it's just impossible. It's kind of like life, you know, people live forever. Like, you know, people will live for like 80 years. Some people live for 25. Like, you know, it's
just random.
It's hard to put loose
it's just
ends.
Random.
Yeah, you know, so I think that was what happened with Game of Thrones, and it was taking him a while to write the books because he's so detailed.
If Game of Thrones of Thrones did their thing like Disney does, where they have their own streaming service, would you buy it? Would you subscribe for $3.99?
I don't even think that's the point.
No, would you?
I would subscribe.
Okay.
I would subscribe, but I think it's not up to HBO. It's not up to George R.R. Martin himself, because like he's been writing this book for like 25 years. You know what I'm saying? It was the showrunners. They didn't want to do it anymore, so they were like, "How can we end this?" And they chose to end it in 2 years with this season, and they should have taken their time. Everybody wanted to rush to do other projects, like David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. They're going to direct the next Star Wars film. Like, everybody wants to do other things. The actors and actresses are getting hired for other roles. Like, Sophie Turner is Dr. Jean Grey in the new X-Men film. So it's like, okay, let's end it while we can, but I think they should have taken their time with it. Especially considering the depth of these complex characters, this complex world, the fantasy elements that they never really touched on, even though it's a fantasy show. Like this whole season just felt rushed. And it's unfortunate that Game of Thrones ended the way it did.
Game of Thrones, in my opinion, had the opportunity to be like the greatest television series of all time. And I don't think it's average by any means. I still think it's great. I still think it's fantastic. It's something that we've never seen before, but it could have locked it up as the GOAT. So now it's like, I feel like it's going to be in a lot of people's top 5, favorite shows. So it's just interesting. We're now at the part where Tyrion and Jon are having a conversation about Khaleesi and her motives and her motivation, and Tyrion is giving a recap of the things she's done, and as she grows more powerful, more men die. And I didn't like that line because Game of Thrones did such a good job making it about just the capturing of the Iron Throne and not about men and women, but because in society we understand these narratives and dynamics, we already like subconsciously get it. But when I was watching, and I was like, the dialogue sounds like the subconscious of a man in regards to a woman getting power. And once again, I go back to the scene where they made her seem like she was like a Hitler figure, right? Because the people that she had taken down in this show were villains. They were vile people. Like they were doing bad things. Cersei is another example where she did a lot of evil things, but when she died or when she was at her apex, she never looked like she didn't get that cinematography where it was absolute power. You know what I mean? She got more of a conniving feeling. And anybody that would come for her, would meet an ill fate. But Daenerys seemed like uncontrollable, like rage, but that wasn't the character that we knew throughout the whole show. So I had to watch the show and drink, and so I'll read you some of my drunk texts that I wrote. I said it sounds like men at the apex of letting things make sense with the woman in charge, and then cowering because she's right and making her seem like a villain. It felt like deep-seated fears of the writers making political statements while the world was watching, and they ruined something great. Then a few minutes later, I said, it felt like someone with a big budget gave a teenager a pen and gave them directing rights. And then they said, write it based on favoritism. And then the next question I had was, so we all know what happened. She passes away. She gets killed. And it's very like Romeo Juliet-ish. And I was like, okay, I can find this. Romeo and Juliet and Game of Thrones are completely different, right? But she dies like kind of romantically in her lover's arms, right? You know, such a small trickles of blood fall from her nostrils and her lips, and she's got these petite features. She also is like harnessing a dragon. So it was like, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, so you killed her, and everybody that was part of her circle is still alive. So the universe, the Game of Thrones world felt really empty after that. And that's what I was confused about. So it only took a 7-10 minute scene between Tyrion and Jon Snow to sway him to want to kill her?
I don't think so. With Jon Snow, and I've said this before on Twitter, Jon Snow is season 4 Sansa.
Yeah,
right?
how did he devolve into like season?
No, I mean that's what's crazy. So look, Sansa was not my favorite character the first season at all.
Right.
I felt like, you know, she thought she was better than everybody else. But it wasn't until she got with Joffrey that I started feeling sorry for her, because I was like, dang, like she got into a seriously abusive relationship. Right. And you know, I respected her a lot more because she had to put on face. Right? Every time Cersei was around, she had to act like she was about to, you know, become the queen. Every time, you know, someone would ask her what she really thought, she could never say, because she had to protect her life. She had to protect the lives of her family members, because she already saw her dad beheaded, you know, for betraying the king. And with Sansa, it was always, Joffrey is my king. Joffrey is my king. Joffrey is my king. With Jon Snow, he echoes same sentiments with Daenerys. Daenerys, she's my queen. She's my queen. Like, I'm not going to go against her because she's my queen. And it's like, Jon was working on my nerves with it, because I was just like, this is not the time nor place. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter whether or not you want the throne. You have to think about other people. You know, it's not about you. You know, and that's what I wanted someone to tell him. Like, it's not about, like, your prophecy is not about you. It's about the fate of the world, and you're about to let your aunt decide it in a terrible way. And
he wasn't like that throughout the entire season. It was more so about the good of the common people. That's why everybody fell in love with him, because he was more concerned with common folk and, you know, what he was defending and his values and virtues. And
it's like he saw common folk die.
And so now he saw common folk die, but now he still has it's a weird dynamic. So his conflict is like, no, that's my queen, and I can't do this to her. I can't. She's the queen, but I don't want the throne. But if I just accepted the throne, then I probably could balance things out. It was so much character conflict, but not, like once again, we say, not enough time to really flesh it out. Another great shot when it comes to cinematography. Jon comes into Daenerys' lair, and she's probably just game planning and brainstorming how she's gonna keep it moving. And he's under a mound of snow, because all of a sudden there's snow in King's Landing, and it was sunny.
It's ash.
Is it ash or is it snow?
I don't know. I thought it was ash, to be honest with you, when I first saw this.
So I thought it was too, but I don't know. I think it's ash. We're gonna assume that it's ash. But Drogon comes and smells Jon Snow while he's getting ready to walk into the castle. I thought that was a great shot. It was almost like her pet dog was like, who are you? You know, are you in a good place to see her? You know, and this is where I thought it was gonna go down. Like, I thought, you know, that pan shot where she's looking at the Iron Throne, Jon Snow is behind her, and she's just like, the culmination of all of these, the whole season is right here, right? And she's finally getting ready to sit on the throne, and they have a conversation. Like, I was confused about their relationship. At first, she's pissed off at him, then she loves him last episode, and I'm like, so if this is it, and Jon has made up in his mind when he walked up those steps that he was gonna kill her, why would the writers just let her get stabbed like that? Like, she is the Mad Queen, and Jaime Lannister killed the Mad King, right? By sneak stabbing him, right? So are we really gonna cop out and do it the same way? Like, are we recycling this way to kill a Targaryen? And why not have a big like battle scene, but not a battle scene between the two of them? I know Daenerys is not a hand-to-hand combat person, but why show Drogon like checking Jon Snow out before he comes into the castle?
Well, I thought it was going to play out like Azula and Zuko with the Agni Kai and Avatar: The Last Airbender, because that was one of the most satisfying series finales I've ever seen. I need to watch it
because you keep talking about it.
No, Avatar: Last Airbender was that show. Okay. Period.
Is it greater than Game of Thrones?
Well, I mean, it's not as detailed. It's only 3 seasons, but it did its job in terms of explaining to 12-year-olds, Eastern feudalism and Eastern philosophy and religion. I thought it was an excellent show. But with Game of Thrones, a lot of people didn't pick up on it because I saw some people were like, "Where is this theory? It didn't come true." And I'm like, "Yeah, it kind of did." So Jon Snow is Azor Ahai, and he's one of the characters in A Song of Fire and Ice. Azor Ahai created this sword called Lightbringer, and he worked on it for 100 days and 100 nights until it was finished. And this was like his 3rd attempt at creating this blade. And it's like the only way he could do it is if he could kill something powerful. And so he called for his wife, who was Nisa, and he drove the sword into her heart. And the way she dies in his arms is the exact parallel of how Daenerys dies in Jon Snow's arms. When I saw that, I was like, "Oh, they played this out like Azor Ahai. Like, this is crazy." So it's like some of these things came true. So that was the parallel to me. Now for me, I hated that Daenerys didn't get to sit in the throne.
Right, she just touched it, and it was foreshadowing.
And that's what reminded me of Azula, because it's like Azula's about to be crowned the Fire Lord. She's about to have the crown pinned into her bun, and it doesn't happen. It's like, she didn't get to relish in that moment, And it's like Daenerys worked so hard to get to that. But what kind of threw me off, I was waiting for Drogon to burn Jon to a crisp and be like Romeo and Juliet, to your point. It didn't happen. Right. He burned the throne instead because, as somebody put, the throne killed Daenerys, which, I mean, it's still kind of hard to buy for me.
I bought into that. I bought into the dragon realizing that the throne was the complete cause of separate. It's almost like the One Ring in Lord of the Rings. There's this one object that everybody is seeking, but once you get it, it brings utter destruction to your life. And the dragon was like, "Listen, if nobody's gonna have this thing, right? She can't have it, you can't have it, nobody can have it. I'll just melt it down and destroy it." Because the dragons are obviously intelligent. They're not just like beasts of burden. They're obviously intelligent.
And the dragon created that throne to start with.
See, I didn't know that.
It's funny that you... Valerian the Dread created the Iron Throne. It was Aegon the Conqueror's dragon.
We thought was gonna be. I feel like our theories were like way greater.
I mean, like they showed his skull in the intro. Right. I'm like, oh, surely
he's gonna come back.
He's coming back
I know.
to life.
We gave Game of Thrones more juice than they actually had. I feel like like everybody's fan theories and ideas about what was gonna come, the Night King, all of that. I mean, we just gave it. Oh my God, I just am face palming right now.
The last thing on the astrolabe still doesn't make sense. Like, why there are 4 dragons and 2 Starks bowing to a comet. Yeah. I'm like, there's like a lot that they didn't explain. But anyway, I think one of the biggest problems with Game of Thrones this season is that they tried to be like Lord of the Rings, where it's like, okay, because I've only watched one of the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, you gotta watch them. They're so good.
Yeah, I know Return of the King won 11 Oscars, but I think what happened is, you can only put so much detail into 3 films, whereas Game of Thrones had 80 hours of material. And I think they tried to make it too much like a superhero film-like ending where, not everything ties in, but, the loose ends that they wanted to tie were tied. Right. And I think there were way too many parallels to the Lord of the Rings, like the Battle of Winterfell paralleling that fight scene in the 2 towers, or to your point, like the Iron Throne being the One Ring, and everybody's killing each other for power, and you have to burn it down to destroy it. And then it also reminded me of The Matrix. Like, you know, if we want to talk about bad endings, I did not like The Matrix Revolutions at all.
It was highly upsetting to a lot of people. I did like the action scenes in Matrix Revolutions though, like not the fight scenes, but because they were like really like corny kind of Dragon Ball Z-ish, but the actual like mech suits fighting the machines. I thought that was cool, and the you know, the Gatling gun scenes. But yes, you're right. It wasn't that great. It wasn't.
No, so with The Matrix Revolutions,
The Matrix was great though.
The first
right.
one, and the second one too. But with The Matrix Revolutions, Neo was the one, right? He was supposed to be, in Game of Thrones terms, the prince that was promised. He was supposed to save the world, right? And what happened is he learned that there were 6 ones before him, and all the one really does is restart the timeline of the Matrix. You just press. It's basically
a restart
like pressing
on
the
a video game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like pressing the reset button. It's like this is a constant loop that will never be broken.
Right.
I feel like with Game of Thrones, it was kind of the same
Breaking
thing.
the wheel.
Where everybody people want to break the wheel by repeating what
the previous
had already happened earlier in history. Right. And it's like the prince that was promised, turns out he's not what we thought. But more importantly, the wheel is still spinning. It's like, yeah, they get to choose a king, but it's like this is still going to be a power struggle. Right. If not with Bran, with somebody else. You know, it's like the Game of Thrones still plays on. You either win or you die, and there's still no middle ground.
Right. Here's what was crazy though. Like, so the dialogue between Dany and Jon, she says to him, and she makes a lot of really good points. Like, she says, you know, this might be hard for you to understand, but nobody's done it this way before. And you have to believe that we won't continue making mistakes, right? And that's very subjective, right? Like, it's a very subjective statement. But I believed her. You know what I'm saying? Because if you look at her track record and what she's done, killing the people in King's Landing was probably the worst thing she's done. But the writing confuses me because, you know, they say, Tyrion says, your people don't love you like you think they do, Cersei. Like, they don't really love you. But everybody in Daenerys' team loves her, aside from like the people that are closest to her, which is really weird. Like, normally, if the people love you, you're fine. You're gonna be fine. You know. So it was just really weird for me to understand why he didn't really buy into what she was saying, and flip so quickly. Once again, we thought Drogon was gonna burn Jon. I thought he was gonna just eat Jon Snow. That would have been cool too. Like, if they both were like, it was like, what happened to both of them? They just died up there? What went down? You know, and left the other characters in speculation as to what happened, and Drogon just disappears. But for Drogon to burn the throne, look at Jon, like, with eyes, pick up Daenerys and fly off, left me with no closure. Like, I'm sitting there like, okay, and what else? Right? You know what I mean? Like,
well, it showed that Drogon truly loved Daenerys. Obviously. I thought that
and
was
it is ash. It's not snow. It's ash. It's just a lot of ash. No snow.
Yeah, and I thought that was extremely profound, because I didn't think that, you know, an animal had, like, well, we saw Ghost and Jon Snow, but it's like Drogon really cared for his queen.
Well, mythical animals always seem to, like, be smarter than the people that, like, the humans that they are around.
Yeah, and I mean, but at the same time, like, Balerion had 4 riders in his lifetime, and it's like Drogon always had 1, and now that 1 is dead, and it's like you get to see a reaction from an animal in full force over a death. You know, usually it's the other way around. Like, when Lady was the first direwolf to die, or like, you know, things like that. Like, we never see it the other way around, and I thought that was fascinating. It was a great shot. But I'm with you. It's like, there's a lot of things with no closure. Yeah. You know, it's like, okay, what happened to all the books that Sam stole? Like, what was the point of his reading? Like, you know. And everybody's complaining about Jon Snow not being on the throne, and it's like, well, Jon Snow never wanted it. You know, like, we knew that. And it's like, well, what was the point of, having him be Aegon Targaryen? And it was like, I think if they had made more episodes, it would have been to, make Daenerys think that her power was in jeopardy. And, it would have been cooler to see a fight to the death sort of thing.
That scene when Drogon flies off, where it seems like that was supposed to be the end of the show. The way it dipped to black, it was like, were y'all trying to make that the end? But it opens back up with Tyrion in a disheveled state, similar to how he left King's Landing. And he gets to make decisions on the future of Westeros after being imprisoned. And time has passed, because it looks like a lot of time has passed. It doesn't look like it's...
Yeah, they said it's been weeks.
So they should have said that somewhere in the dialogue, because I'm like, okay, how much time has passed? So it's been weeks. He looks disheveled. But how does he get to make decisions on who is going to be the king or queen of the Iron Throne? Like, that doesn't exist anymore. The ruler of the Six Kingdoms. How do you feel about that? How does that doesn't make any sense?
That's what I don't know. Like, I didn't understand that. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, this scene is like the epitome of rushing a season. Like, they introduce characters that we haven't seen in a while or have never met before. Like, we didn't get to meet the Prince of Dawn. We didn't get to see Robin Aaron's glow up. I don't know. I don't know. Like, if breast milk can do that for people.
Breast milk, like.
But oh my God, it was like Neville Longbottom. Like, that was crazy. I was like, not just wait a doggone minute. I know that's not who I see.
And that was him
with the Knights of the
that
Pale.
Was him. And,
we haven't seen Yara all season pretty much.
So where was she in the Battle of Winterfell? I mean, not in the Battle of Winterfell, in the Battle of King's Landing. She literally said to Theon, she said, listen, we're going to go fight and help them out. And then now she's like she's here at the end. Like,
right. I don't know. It's just a lot for me. It's like Theon died. We didn't get to see her reaction to it. She didn't go back to King's Landing because she was too busy trying to reunite the Iron Islands and being their queen.
And she honestly says,
why the hell is she mad? Like, why is she mad at Sansa? Like,
and Arya's mad at her.
What is the reason?
Arya's mad at her because she's telling the truth. She said, like, we came here behind her. Jon Snow killed her, and we should kill him. Period. Like, and then Arya's like, you better shut up before I come over there. And she's like, just quiet. You know what I mean? It's not real. It's not realistic. It's not realistic. Like, she is a very strong personality, and I don't think she would cower from Arya like that. She doesn't even know what Arya's been doing. You know what I mean? Right. So.
Right. And then I know a lot of people were complaining about like Gendry and Arya not ending up together, but it's like Arya never wanted to be that. Like, even like from season 1, she told us she's not a lady. Yeah. That's not her. And when she saw Nymeria in the wild, that's not
Out of everybody, I can accept her character arc. Arya has the best character arc in the show.
Yeah, she does. Well, Arya and Sansa.
And Sansa too.
I think Sansa's character arc is tremendous. Right. And it's underrated. We want to talk about like, Daenerys not ending up on the throne and how it's like, oh, they didn't want a woman on the Iron Throne, but it's like Sansa got her throne. Right. Like, Sansa's the queen Sansa got to do what Rob couldn't do. Sansa gets to be a better leader than her mom was. Sansa gets to be, a better leader than her father was. Like, and it's crazy because it's like of all the children of Ned and Catelyn Stark, I never would have thought that it would have been Sansa at the end of the day doing what she did, defending her home. Right. Sansa wanted to leave for so long. So it's like, to go from wanting to be in King's Landing with Joffrey to wanting to protect the North and protect what's hers and her family's. I mean, it's beautiful to see. Granted, she had to go through a hell of a lot of trauma.
Yeah. But she did it.
And it was heartbreaking, and it was really hard to watch. And I hate that she had to go through that. I would rather her not have to be abused by not one but two men, But
how about the scene when she dismissed her
uncle?
She
got to see Ramsay die.
She got to see Ramsay
die and delight in it. She gets to sit on the throne. She checked Jon's power because I felt like Jon didn't know anything. When it came to trying to unite kingdoms and things.
He had gotten really emotional. at that point.
Yeah, he did. Sansa became a power player by watching other power players. Sansa learned how to play offense, and Sansa knew the politics of the Game of Thrones. And it's like, even though she didn't even want the Iron Throne, it's like she was like, I'm gonna protect what's mine. You know, y'all not gonna tell me what to do. I've been through too much.
Sansa's line where she says, "Uncle, please sit." That was a great scene because he was just going in, and the reaction shots were pretty good. I like that part. And
that's another thing they didn't explain. It's like, okay, how did he retake his castle? Right. You know, because it was like the Lannisters were there.
So I don't know. I mean.
And like, wasn't he like they had him as a prisoner of war? I don't know. And it's like all of a sudden Sam is like the head of his house.
Yeah.
Like, what?
I'm looking for the water bottle too, by the way, in this scene. There was an actual.
There's a water bottle.
There was actually another future artifact in Game of Thrones. No, this is no lie. This actually happened. They don't care about
the show. They don't.
So
there's a water bottle.
So here's my question, and I brought this up early in the pod. We talked about rating the show, and I said narrative was important, characters, villain, performance, cinematography, music, emotional impact, and the long-term impact for repeat viewing. If you could give a rating from 1 to 10 for narrative for this episode, what would you give it?
Narrative? Oof. I'd give it a 6, a 5.
Okay.
Just, it felt rushed.
Okay.
It was just a lot of moving parts that just, it would have made more sense if they had more episodes. You know, they got to play this like anime. Sometimes you need the filler. You know, Naruto gave me way too much filler, but sometimes you need it.
Because it creates the broad story. So you're not left speculating. You know what happened. Like you see, they literally spell out to you what happened. And I think we're losing that in a lot of film. It's like Game of Thrones is not a series where it's left to interpretation. Like you literally have a glossary of information, and the end goal was to try to figure out who was on the Iron Throne at the end of it. And you know, nobody was on the Iron Throne. Not really. Technically, nobody got the Iron Throne. Which I could see you want to infer that's unnecessary power and it's devastating. Because Tyrion asks questions like, what unites people? Do armies unite people? Obviously not. Does gold? No, it doesn't. Does the throne do it? No, you do. So I think that was a theme that they were trying to do, but it wasn't fleshed out enough.
Right. And I also think from a prophecy standpoint, because a lot of people are really hung up about that. Like George R.R. Martin said once, if I could find the quote, he was talking about how prophecies are tropes, basically. And it's like sometimes people get too married to the idea of a prophecy. And I'm trying to find the quote.
I can still ask you questions though about the characters in the show. So if you would rate the characters in this show, what would you give them? Overall, just like character acting, like character.
Oh, the acting is flawless.
Well, I want to say the characters that made it to the end. Are you happy with that?
Well, I feel like Brienne of Tarth felt the most out of place, to be honest. I would have preferred her dying at the Battle of Winterfell, because it's like the way they set up a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which was season 8, episode 2. The way they set that up, it was like, okay, she's dying. Like, off rip. You know, okay, let me mentally prepare to see Brienne of Tarth die a valiant war hero that she is, and that way someday someone will sing a song about her. Yeah, she fought a bear.
If y'all forgot, let's not forget.
Right.
Let's not forget.
With no kind of armor, you know. So it's like I understood her writing the page in Jaime's book. The memes were funny about them, but Brienne always valued knighthood above all else. You know, knighthood was a sacred thing to her. So for her to finish Jaime's page meant a lot. What I was waiting for and what I was not satisfied with was she didn't write her own page.
No, she didn't. It was about
And I felt like she should have written her own page because, she became a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. She was knighted by Sir Jaime, fought in the Battle of Winterfell, fought a bear. It's like she fought for Stannis Baratheon. She protected the Starks too. And now she's in the Kingsguard. Like, if anything, she should have written about herself or at least started the page.
Once again, it just shows the writing. It's like a subconscious writing thing that happens. I feel like. I think it's also not poetic that the man that she loved. It's not poetic. The man that she loved died, going back to a woman that was bad, right? But he knighted her and gave her like this thing that she wanted for the longest. And he also like kind of played her and was like, I'm in love with you, but I'm really not in love with you. I love this woman more. I like you a lot, but I'm not staying with you. It just wasn't cool. Like, it wasn't a cool ending for her, And then she has to write something positive about him in his death. Like, who wrote that?
I think, they said that Jaime was addicted to Cersei, and we saw that, he was having a child with her, and I still don't buy that she was pregnant, to be honest with you, but...
the writer said that she was, and...
But it was like she was supposed to be the disease that Jaime just could not let go. But I would have been much more satisfied if he killed her in an Azor Ahai Nisa Nisa way than the way they died together. It's like, I'm going to kill you as the bricks are falling, knowing that I won't live this, but I don't know. I'm not a writer. So, that's not how it went down apparently, but okay.
So what would you give the villain in this episode if there was one? 1 to 10.
I don't think there was a villain. Like, it was like we knew Daenerys' death was coming. The way it happened, I was like, oh, okay. I was shocked that Jon Snow pulled off the Azor Ahai theory, but
it was an unfulfilling death for her. It was an empty death.
Yeah, it felt empty. So I don't know if I would necessarily say she was the villain in this episode. I don't know.
Character performance.
Oh, the actors are excellent. Like, flawless performance by all of them, especially Peter Dinklage and Emilia Clarke.
I think they did a really good job. I will also have to give them a 10 for their performances. I'll give them a 10 for the visuals and the cinematography for this whole season. It was great.
Yes.
Things that stand out in my mind were the Dothraki with their flame swords riding, and we had like the wide shot of them crossing the battlefield. That was cool. All of the shots in this episode were great. Once again, Daenerys with the dragon wings behind her as she walked up and to look over her army. That was great. Drogon taking her away into like the mist and into the ash. That was cool. Music was great as always.
Yeah.
Emotional impact. No, I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling an emotional impact in this one. So I would have to give the emotional impact of this episode like a 6. I see what they were trying to do, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it in my gut,
That's why I feel like The Bells was the best episode of this season, because it felt like for me, it was like watching The Passion of the Christ. And I still haven't watched it a second time, because it's so heavy. And it felt so real. What I love about Game of Thrones as a world and as a series is that you felt like you were there. It felt like a microcosm of the world. And as Oprah said about one of the books in her book club, it was like you could smell the people.
This is
That's how
Chloe,
real
you need
it
a
was.
shirt that says you can smell the people. That is your line.
Like, it felt that way. It was like, man, like I am
here.
Part of this world. This is the definition of a book series coming to life. And I felt like, as rushed as the season was, The Bells, just the emotional impact, I felt even more exhausted watching that than watching the Battle of Winterfell. Because it was like, wow, like people are dying. This is the one time where the common folk take center stage. It was like Varys dying twice. He was the master of whispers. He spoke for the people. He was the mouthpiece of the people. When he failed, he died, and Daenerys killed his people as well.
Right.
It was
Right.
heavy. And a lot of people talk about why isn't Aya being an assassin? I'm like, because Aya's a human being with emotions as well. Like, I mean, if it doesn't matter how much training you have, if you saw people dying around you, you would feel some type of way
absolutely.
too. Like, you would have some sort of breakdown. Like, ask a soldier, you know? So, I mean, that to me was emotional impact. This episode, it was like, okay, you felt like some things when a character would die or a character would reunite with somebody, but for the most part, I'm with you. Like, it was very diplomatic.
Right.
It was
hollow.
very like, yeah, it wasn't as fulfilling as it could have been, but it did enough to tie the loose ends. But
Exactly.
yeah, like from an
that
emotional
sums it up
standpoint,
perfectly.
yeah.
Long-term impact and repeat viewing. How many times would you watch this episode again?
I don't know.
You know, I thought one was great, right? I did like what.
For me, I like.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I am at the point where I'm gonna take a break from Game of Thrones for a really long time before I watch the entire series
Right.
again, because I would love to watch it again, but it's like the comments. It's just it's exhausting, you know. It's like I'm one of those people that hate that people hate Game of Thrones right now because it's such a beautiful show, and I hate that they didn't take their time in closing it. But it's not nearly as bad as what it could have been.
It could have been worse.
And maybe one day we'll all get to a collective realization of that, but it's just like, it's too much negativity around the show right now for me to want to watch it again.
What was interesting is Tyrion's line. Jon Snow, he said a lot, and I think the writers put this in as an Easter egg, and I'm going to stand by this. Tyrion says, not a lot of people are happy. And I thought that was a direct correlation to how they ended the show. I think they were using that character to like voice, the population's opinions. And it says, not a lot of people are happy. And Jon says, like, will it change? And Tyrion's like, ask me in 10 years. Right. So if we reach I thought that was clever that they did that. That was very clever that they did that. So respect to them on that front. But yeah, I think that people might need some time to let it marinate. Just everything that's happened in the show. Once again, it's not a bad show. If you look at the ratings, it's like one of the greatest shows. It's rated one of the greatest shows of all time. But
yeah, and I mean, if you look at the number of people that watched it, like 19.3 million people tuned in for a series finale
crazy.
In an age where you have streaming and social media. Like, the fact that we can still collectively gather around the show. I mean, hats off to everybody that has ever worked on this show in the 8 seasons that it was on the air. Because, I mean, like, season 1, the only people that were watching it were the people that read the books. And then by season 3, by the time the Red Wedding happened, it became a cultural phenomenon. And it grew and grew and grew and grew to touch people that were either fans of the book or fans of the show or both. And, it's like that is a huge feat. Like, some shows wish they had this problem. Right. But yeah, I think, as a collective unit, as unsatisfied as we were, I think we are being a little too hard on the show. But at the same time, there are high expectations to close a show of this caliber, and they didn't deliver all the way. So it's just a really harsh dilemma for a fantastic show. And I think we all just need some time to let it breathe for a bit. And I mean, I wonder what does happen in 10 years. Is that when the last book comes out? Like, what does that mean? Or like, is that when the prequel is gonna end? Because there is a prequel coming out on HBO next season. So, I mean, I don't know. I think Game of Thrones is still a top tier show. I think there are going to be very few shows like it. Especially going into the next decade. But I think that we all need to just let it breathe. Like, season 8 was weak, but it's not as weak as we're making it.
Like you said, it's a great show. We're gonna look back and appreciate it. Like you said, the emotions are very raw right now.
Because you know what?
For long-term impact repeat viewing, I'm gonna give it a 10 because everybody's gonna go back and watch this at some point. It's very rewatchable. It's a very rewatchable show.
I think for me, what's aggravating is Game of Thrones fans remind me a lot of NBA fans.
Ooh.
Right?
She did.
Yes, they do. Okay, because I work indirectly with the National Basketball Association, so I got to hear it all the time.
One thing I'd like to say, this is a sports podcast. We also do a lot of other things, and the situations in regards to the Lakers front office and franchise right now were greater than this episode of Game of Thrones. I would just like to put that out there right now. Rob Pelinka, Magic Johnson, Jeannie Buss, LeBron James. That is some solid material. I just wanted to put that out there. That's on wax forever on this podcast. That's a time capsule right there.
Yeah, but anyways, Game of Thrones fans remind me a lot of NBA fans. NBA fans love comparing people to Jordan, particularly LeBron, but everything is a Jordan comparison. Everything is on this day, Allen Iverson did this, or on this day, Michael Jordan had his flu game. It's like we never really appreciate what's happening in front of us. And then 5 years removed from said event, it's like on this day, the Heat had the greatest comeback in the history of any Game 6, and Ray Allen hit the greatest 3 of all time. And it's like, I lived that moment. And I remember people were like, well, Tim Duncan wasn't on the floor, and this wouldn't have happened in the 90s. But then it's like 5 years later, it's like, greatest 3-point shot of all time. Ray Allen's the GOAT. That's why he's a Hall of Famer. It's like, we have to appreciate this show. And we have to appreciate the moments we have while they're here. I feel like we do a lot of comparisons to what's already happened. And then I feel like our generation is very much a generation that is yearning for nostalgia. We're a very nostalgic generation, and it's okay to reminisce about the past, but I think sometimes we get too caught up in comparing the present to the past, where we don't appreciate the present, and then years later something comes around and it's like, oh, well, it wasn't good as this 10 years ago. And I'm like, well, 10 years ago you said this wasn't good as something from 5 years ago. So I think, we all know that season 8 was not what we wanted, but damn, we gotta appreciate the fact that we even got season 8.
I love it. I love that. That was raw. That was unfiltered, and I love it. That was solid. That was raw.
It just irks my nerves. I get that we're mad, but we gotta, at some point, we can't complain.
We can't beat it into the ground.
We can't complain all the time. We are beating dead horses forever. There are plenty of shows that didn't end well. Some people brought up Lost. Some people brought up Dexter. For me, I don't like how Naruto transitioned into Boruto. I can't, there's a lot about Boruto that I have a problem with. So, I mean, it's I'm saying, it could have ended so much worse. No, it didn't end as well as it could have, but Jesus Christ. At least we got this for 8 years. At least we all came together as millions of people to enjoy this show. At least we got to see complex characters, no matter their age, no matter their gender, no matter who they were, on the nobility chart, and got this epic of a show.
Right. For the people that didn't see what Brienne wrote about Jaime, because it was really quick, she wrote of Jaime, pledged himself to the forces of men and rode north to join them at Winterfell alone, faced the army of the dead, and defended the castle against impossible odds until the defeat of the Night King, escaped imprisonment, and rode in an attempt to save the capital from destruction, died protecting his queen, period. And then she ends it like that. If you didn't pause it and read it. So I can take that. I mean, I get what they were doing, so I can accept that.
I mean, she was his lover and his secretary, working every day of the week.
Shout out.
11 years of sacrifice.
Yeah, she's a real one. She's a real one. You know what she reminds me of? Liz Cambage. I love her too. So
the WNBA superstar DJ on the side.
Yeah, she reminds me. But hopefully Torment, gets to holler at her. Post post
doubt
it,
it.
but
I doubt it
yeah,
severely.
she's stuck on some Jamie boy. I want to give a shout out to John.
I think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think he's gonna be the hand to the king beyond the wall. I think that's what happened with Jon Snow. I think he became the king beyond the wall.
Is Game of Thrones done? You don't. I know that we're getting prequels, but do you feel like they're gonna try to do some more episodes or no? What do you think?
I think
they should stop. I think they should stop.
I think the showrunners and the writers are tired. It obviously shows, but the books, I think we'll get more detail in the books. But I'm not gonna put like too much weight on the books because I think a lot of people are like, oh, Daenerys is not gonna end up that way in the books. And it's like, no, I think honestly, the series finale, a lot of these storylines is how George R.R. Martin would have had it. Because, he's really good at, not having the obvious happen to people. Because like people aren't always this obvious. Not like Game of Thrones, like I said earlier, it's a microcosm of the world. Like not every person is going to be, what's the word? Like not every person is gonna grow. Like you have people out there like Jamie where it's like they're doing really well and then they relapse. There are people in the world like this. So I think we're gonna get the same ending maybe not the same ending because there's a lot of things that the show left out, but I think we'll get a similar ending in the books as we did to the show. It'll just be fleshed out a hell of a lot more to where it makes sense. And people will still be mad. That's the gag about any show or any film. Like, no matter how it ends, it can make the most sense in the world, but people will still be mad.
I want to give a shout out to Jonathan Freeman, who was the cinematographer for this episode, The Iron Throne. Man, you did a fantastic job. Those shot selections. If I wanted to, blow up some posters from every still in that film and put them up in my place, it would look epic. So I want to give a shout out to him. He's a Canadian-American cinematographer. He's a multi-award winning director of photography for Motion Pictures. He's done Remember Me, 50 Dead Men Walking, The Edge of Love, and multiple Game of Thrones episodes. Also Boardwalk Empire, which I'm definitely going to check out because I love the shot selection that he did. So he gained a fan in me. He truly did his thing. So that's all I got, Chloe. That ends it.
Yeah.
We got to find a new series.
Well, you know what? I want to start. I want to start The Sopranos. I really do want to watch that because I remember that. And it's so funny because people are like, "Oh, The Sopranos had one of the best endings ever," and I was like, "Well, my mom watched The Sopranos, and I remember she, like many other people, were really upset that it's like you see Tony look up and it fades to black." But I do want to watch The Sopranos.
I'll join you with The Sopranos. I will join you with The Sopranos. I've never seen it before. I heard it was great. The Sopranos and Band of Brothers are the two shows that I need to check out. So,
all right, I'm gonna also check out Westworld because Westworld season 3 is about to start.
Let's do that too. So we got some stuff to talk about.
Okay.
So HBO still getting our money. We still true. We're employed by the company, and
long may they reign.
Right.
Because, and that's the other thing. I wish I understood Bran being the king, and that's one of the things I'm talking about. I feel like Bran's gonna be the king in the books anyway, but it would have been nice to flesh out his powers and how they came to that decision.
Right. So we're gonna wrap it. Follow us on Instagram, on SoundCloud, on Twitter, on YouTube. SoundCloud, The Real Pine, on Twitter at The Pine Pod, on Instagram at The Pine Podcast, and on YouTube at The Pine Podcast. We love the subscribers. Thank you for supporting us. Chloe, how can the people get in contact with you?
At Closter Talks, CHLOSTER Talks, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, YouTube, you know it, you got it.
Shout out to our imitators, can never be originators. We want to give a thank you to you. All right? 1.